Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, presented by Good Marketing and Wagoner Financial. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
So insurance is something most people would rather not think about. After all, people and businesses pay real money in the hopes of never having to use the services that they're paying for. Many think that getting the cheapest policy and foregoing live agency is the best path, but here to shed some light on why not having a live expert advising you, among other topics today, is the State Farm agent, Mr. Kirk Byrens. Welcome back to the show, Kirk.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So there's a lot to unpack about all of this, but why don't you talk a little bit about how the heck did you get involved in insurance? Not a lot of people sit there in college and say, can't wait to go be an insurance salesman.
100%. I think none of us, in fact, were doing that. And that's, I'll always sing the praises of Olivet College, which is just, about 20, 30 minutes south of here. It's one thing that they do incredibly well, among others. But yeah, they had an insurance program there. And I was in love with business and kind of psychology at the time. And I had a teacher that just, when you have that kind of like 30 student to teacher ratio, you have that ability for a teacher to come in and tap you and say, hey, this is where I think you should go. And without that kind of guidance, I'm not even sure where I would have gone, right? But now it's 16 years later, and I've been in the insurance industry since.
You started when you were 12?
Pretty close. I was 19. And that's what's so incredible is I got licensed to sell insurance. I had an internship from an agent that had come in to our school to speak. And next thing you know, I'm making cold calls in a break room and, starting from there. So I've been with the company through, making cold calls to working for an agent while I was still a student, which was so incredible with Olivet. They allowed me to move things online. So I was back then. Yeah. So which was incredible. I was full-time in 2012, I believe. I was full-time it would have been 2011 range. I was full-time for my senior year at an agency working, making a salary while doing about 4 or 5 online classes.
Wow. Okay. So graduation looms large. It's time to cut the cord and get out and get it. I mean, or did you just stay with the people that you were with?
Yeah, I stayed. Okay. And then from there, after working there for about 2-3 years, I moved on to State Farm Corporate. And that's where I did things like IT training and assisting the agents across the entire state. So I had an entire plethora of agents to talk to and interact with before I went on to start my own agency. Got
it. Okay. So State Farm was part of your roots. It was obviously a million different companies that you could represent, including being a non-captive agent and being able to write policies for multiple. Is that an independent agency? So there's a couple of different paths to go. What is the value proposition in your mind for State Farm as the place you decided to hang your shingle?
Well, beyond my loyalty, right, of spending time with them and them, showing me that education and the development. I mean, the amount of things you have to learn as being a young, 20-year-old. Gosh, I always tell people I grew up in insurance. And quite frankly, the things I wouldn't have known, from learning about mortgages to learning about car loans. I mean, the loyalty and the experience of having agents there to train you was incredible. You might be talking about buying car insurance, but then when you've got someone who's there who's talking to hundreds of people, thousands of people that are buying cars, you're getting advice and you're getting that assistance on things that not only you might run into, but even things in the local community to watch out for, or maybe where to get referred if you have an accident. So I really love the captive space because we understand the product that we represent, right? Versus maybe I have 50 different policies for different companies, and each one might change daily on what they're doing, right? So it allows you to be streamlined from that perspective and to give a real clear amount of communication to the customer, as well as being there to assist. I think the huge thing that I see is if you're not captive, that access channel that you have to the company to be an advocate, I always kind of explain to people, I essentially work for you, the customer, right? And that's an incredible checks and balance that's in place from the company because, I'm there and I can make you more than a number, right? It's directly then I have things like agent appeals or things that I can do to assist you through things that you may have gotten a piece of mail about and they said, call a 1-800 number and it's good luck. Right.
Okay. Well, and that's kind of where my lead-in came from. Mm-hmm. I've been around the block a little bit and I worked in an industry before what I do now that was really closely aligned with insurance companies. And so you could kind of see the differentiation between, managing a customer through a claim, whether they're with this company or that company or that company, and the look on their faces and the confidence that those customers that I had would wear was evident, and a lot of that had to do, and I'm not trying to tell your story here, but the relationship with the agent.
Of course.
And so But I mean, online world and the internet, I mean, now we're obviously decades away from the internet's invention, but certainly more and more people are saving a buck by going on a lower cost website. Because you honestly, I guess the philosophy is you're cutting out the middleman.
Correct.
You know, you're not paying an agent to do the work that they're doing. But now you're kind of menu selecting, I want this amount of coverage for this amount. And then you look at the monthly bill. Oh, I want to shave that down by $100.
You're driving.
So what's the downside to that? I mean, I already kind of know just as a person on the planet, and I teach you have to kind of deliver this value proposition. But, you know, how do you sell the value proposition of having an agent? And I know State Farm isn't probably the price leader, but talk about the value proposition behind your work.
Well, I think what's great is that we're always, from my experience here, I'll tell you anecdotally, we're somewhere in the top 3 when you're talking to us rates wise. There's rarely a case where it's going to be 0 to 60 between one company or another. Each one of us has an equation, and you are the variable, right? So when you plug in, every company has got an equation, and most all of us are characterizing or looking at similar things. And so whether that's previous insurance history, whether that's claims, number of people in the household, number of cars, we're all playing the same relative game, okay? So when we see things that are wildly different, that's a lot of times actually indicative of, did someone drive on their own? Did they go online? Did they start doing all these things? Because what you're doing and why you're actually saving a large amount of money for these other companies is you're taking that responsibility. You've checked all the boxes. You had all the opportunity along the way to ask questions, and then you checked the terms and agreements, and you've completely at that point handed yourself over to that company saying, I did it all and I'm happy with my choices. So come claim time, there isn't, hey, I talked with Kirk. He was fully aware of my situation, and the advice that was given led me to this issue. Well, that's why we have things like errors and omissions for if we do make mistakes, right? To protect the customer. Not only that, I'm incentivized to make sure my customers are happy, right? That's that checks and balance that I was talking about. And so we see it 100 times, whether someone goes online, even to statefarm.com, and starts their own quote. The amount of discounts I find or things that they read one way versus another. I mean, I talk about doing this for 16 years and my head can spin during a quote. You know, you get enough stuff going on, enough variables, enough people. Every household is too unique for there not to be some form of interpretation that needs to go on.
Right. And I harken back to my oldest is out of college now, but you know, you have the housing for the university, which is great. Correct. And then like any college student, you want to be one of those knuckleheads where you have 5 knuckleheads, you know, renting a house.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I remember the lease that, you know, and I'm reasonably real estate savvy, but I was going through the lease and, you know, they talked about a requirement to have renter's insurance. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I got 5 guys who are not related to each other. You know, it's like, so you lean on an agent and just say, okay, well, wait, how do we do this? And it's like, well, does one guy hold the policy and does that cover the house? Am I insuring the house or am I insuring my son?
Right.
And do all 4 of these guys need to have their own policies, or can one guy have it and they split the costs and they pay each other back? And then it's like, yeah, but that's, you know, this doesn't seem necessary. Why would I have that? It's like, well, here's a scenario where that coverage would matter. I'm 100%. Like, oh, yeah, I can see that happening. 100%. But you lose that, right? Yes. If you're sitting there clicking through the menu, you lose that.
And not only that, almost every policy is going to be designed off of state requirements. And so all of us have essentially a set template that's in place of if you clicked these buttons, everyone's going to have certain required coverages. Okay. Yeah. And that's because each company has to file with the state of Michigan or the state that you're in. But then what happens is you have the endorsements, and that's where I tell everyone, this is your chance to really customize. What am I worried about? I may have one person that doesn't have a sump pump, and I have another one that their sump pump dies every single year and they know it's coming, right? And so you start to look at that, and that's something that would be an endorsement to even have coverage for. And so the standard policy that you clicked through, unless you went to the options and said, I'd like to pay more, you're going to miss out on one of my most critical claims that I see, right? And so similar to what you're talking about with having, 5 guys in one house, each one of those becomes a litany of different risks that could happen from what the kids are doing or who they're allowing, or do they have somebody living there? I mean, it's like you said, that rotation alone, we hear that daily of someone calling me. Right. I have somebody coming up to Michigan State all the time from a different state, and mom and dad either need to be on the policy, and now, oops, They may have had Progressive at home, and now there's something canceling because it looks like they moved to a different state and there's no one there to correlate what's going on.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to give a tip of the cap to my friends at Wagoner Financial. Whether you're just starting out, planning for retirement, or anywhere in between, Wagoner is there to help you make smart financial decisions. They offer comprehensive, customized plannings from investment strategies and tax solutions to insurance assessments, accounting, and and estate planning. Wagoner is dedicated to supporting you, your family, your business, and your future. Using their unique team approach and maximizing each member's specializations, they ensure that someone who will have an answer to your question and is always ready to help. Schedule a consultation by visiting wagoner-financial.com or give them a call at 517-853-3367. So, is there more on the value of having an agent? I mean, obviously accountability, errors and omissions, counseling. You're like, okay, hey, I need this. I got a policy. To be on the phone with someone or in a person's office. But I think there's some value. So, people go online to buy their insurance to save money because they think they're cutting out the agent as the middle person. But it's also kind of convenience, right? I don't want to drive down to Okemos and 100%. Climb a set of stairs or take the elevator if you're ADA to get to Kirk Byrens State Farm Agency. But you are on the road, right? So, it's phone calls, Zoom, coffee tables at people's homes and stuff, right?
Exactly. We can meet anywhere where they're at, right? So we have everything from virtual live appointments that are on State Farm secured networks so that you're not just jumping into some random call. You're not texting a buddy of yours a credit card, right? All these exposures that we've seen from trying to do business on the fly. Or even down to, like you were mentioning, still the some of the benefits of having an agent. There's maintenance to your policy that needs to go on, right? And so when you set things up online and just let it sit, there is no maintenance that's going on. There's nobody checking in if something changed. The amount of people I have that might buy a Gator or a Kubota, right, or something like that, and they don't even think to insure it, and then you've got somebody getting flipped in the property and it's declined because you didn't disclose it, right? So there's just... You name the amount of things that I can come up with anecdotally, because I'll probably get a call when I get back to the office. I tell everyone, if you think it's not going to happen to you, I got a call about it today. That's pretty much what we run into. So, when you go out online and you're doing those things, all those access points are there. From a live virtual appointment, or from, like I was telling you, if you at least go through somebody that's got an agent. I got the quote that got sent in today from somebody doing a quote online with 5-6 cars and a home, and they've been with Progressive. That all came through to me, and then I got the chance to look through it and say, hey, you did a great job. Here's where you missed probably about 35% in discounts. Okay. And so we went through and we talked about that. And then from there, we identified some of the other things, like having 5-6 cars in a home, and then being about 10 times under the insured limit he should have been. And he'd been with Progressive for 10 years, right? But there was no check-in for that. He just had what he had. But 10 years ago, he was not working where he was at. He wasn't, developed into the lifestyle he had. I don't think he had half the cars he had, right? So it made sense when he set up. But because he'd been doing it online, it just kept the same format along the way. And no one said, hey, have you thought about this, right? Even down to that advice, whether he decides to go with us or not, taking the time to talk to an agent will uncover something for you.
Right on. You talked before about a secure website, and that just made me flash on when the pandemic hit. Oh. And I was a corporate dweller, and everyone was sent home. And we're like, all right, sign out your laptops, and we'll give you a couple monitors, and you'll set up at home. Yes. And then my IT guy almost fell off his chair. He's like, well, wait a minute. The firewalls that we have here in this building, that prevent, hacking and all that kind of stuff. He's like, do you realize we're going to have like 30 different people on 30 different residential Wi-Fi platforms with whatever types of security that they have?
Exactly.
And so like that just kind of unraveled in my head. So if we can pivot just for a second, I'd like to get your take on the insurance company's role or offerings in the world of whether it's cybersecurity protection or fraud protection or like, what should people be looking for, whether it's a business or personal? Maybe talk about both. Like what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, a lot of things. And that's the beauty of getting those. Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say. That's the beauty of getting those calls, right? I have plenty of things that we can think of to keep us up at night. But when you look at it two-pronged, right, you've got the personal side. And I can tell you right now from my experience, both anecdotal and statistically, it's no longer if we're going to have a credit card breach, it's when. Right? If we're going to have something happen. And in most of those cases, There's things that I want to suggest to people. One, text alerts. Get a text alert for a transaction that you feel would be outside your norm, or even get one for over $100. You can set these limits on almost every single credit card company or any of the ones that you have. Even down to mine will alert me of a transaction where I paid my own credit card, right? But it was saying, hey, this was a transaction that you flagged for, say, X amount. Okay. So that way you can be sitting there and get a text and say live, no, that's not me, and stop it immediately. And then that way you're not down a chain of 10, 15 events trying to go back through your statements to find
a month later.
Right. Because what is your threshold for something that flags your mind? It might be different, right? $50 to a college student might be the end of their checking account, right? Whereas you may not even look unless it's 500. Right. So all of a sudden you could have a litany going back 6 months that you've got to dig through, and then you're going to have to deal with the disputes of going through that. Right. So that's just one example there of something that you can do. You've also got two-factor authentication, right? If I go to log in, I was just at my home computer yesterday, and I got a notification about Instagram. I haven't been on Instagram in 15 years. I don't think I've messed. It may not have even been around that long. That just tells you how long it's been since I checked it. But I get a notification that said, hey, here's your reference code for your login. Well, they can't log in. Thank goodness I had two-factor authentication on something that I didn't even think about back then, right?
Right.
But you talked about it, convenience, speed. People are going 100 miles an hour, and they just don't think it's going to happen. So first and foremost, let's talk about when it does happen, right? Almost every homeowner's policy, and I can tell you everyone that we offer at State Farm has the option for things like fraud coverage to be in place. Now, where that expands out, and I've seen some cases that are scary, is let's say I have my grandmother who's looking to sell a vehicle. She's had a Buick for years. You know how it is. It might only have 10,000 miles, even though it's a 20-year-old car, right? They're gems. And so she's going to sell this off, and maybe she accepts a check for $5,000, right? And then that check is faulty. Where does grandma go? She has no options then. She accepted a check, she handed off the title and signed it off and thought we're good to go. But when you have things like fraud or cyber protection on your homeowners, you can actually make claims against those. I've had plenty of those where that's an exact case that occurred. Somebody sold a car to a private seller and came back with fraud, and they were able to get those things recouped.
Wow. Okay.
The other part of it is if you do have a breach that's extensive enough, right? Whether you're using things like LifeLock or some of these other third-party companies, they may only cover you for up to say 10 grand worth of this event that occurred. Now, I may have an event that's say $10,000. What if that damages my credit? What if now I've got to go out to all these other bureaus and explain this fraud? Well, when you have that coverage on your home, you're getting a claim representative who actually sends those documents to the credit companies. I don't know how you would do it by yourself.
Right. Because if your credit is bad because of a circumstance like that, you might be made whole from that incident, but you might have a 1% higher interest rate on a 30-year mortgage because of it, right?
So there's
we're talking about
$100,000 loss.
Right. Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So again, these are the kinds of things that need to be aired out.
Right. And that's from the personal perspective. So now let's talk business, right? You had talked about it with your IT guy shuttering, right? And that IT guy, it's not even coming directly out of his paycheck when something goes off, right? Because the reality is it's not if it's going to happen, it's when. And so when everybody went home, it's so important that the business owners have data compromise, cybersecurity, right? Because if we're storing credit cards on file and somebody just accesses that data bank, now good luck tracking where that event occurred. But you've got this exposure then of all these, customers. And how do you build trust again? That's a huge one for me. On once I've had a company breach that trust and they failed you, I don't know how you build that trust back. That's a horrifying thing that they allowed for your credit information or your. It can be so much.
Numbers,
all of it.
Date of birth.
You can't put it back in the box.
Right.
It's out. Right. And so that's what's scary is you've got to have a plan for when now, because if is happening.
Right. Got it. Okay. And then you and I had a conversation about remote workers. I mean, we were talking about cybersecurity and kind of getting that all done.
Yes.
But to kind of maybe share some of the acumen you've learned on having remote workers and, building confidence in our listeners that you will do video calls or come out and, don't feel like because you're paying for a live agent that you need to drive to a brick and mortar facility.
Well, and it's funny because a lot of times, even if you did go online, you might have selected a company that you didn't realize provided an agent, and they're going to assign you one. So it's still coming into that factor because the agent's going to be there to manage it, because that may be the reason why that company is able to operate in that state, is having authority or having set people that are available. Okay?
Right.
So a lot of times, once again, unless we're specifically going with a company that doesn't have agents, which even we've seen things like Progressive has agents, right? It's becoming more the trend that we're seeing companies adding on agents, or at least some are choosing to go that route versus getting rid of it altogether. And that's also because of the company's ability to analyze and provide the right, policies for the right customers. That gets so hard. I mean, even with AI coming in, it's only as good as the information you put into it. Right. And so when you're at that risk and just kind of, segueing back onto the remote work aspect, having a ton of remote workers taught me, as well, just how much is being done online, right? When I've got these people that I'm interacting with and they're living their life through me digitally, and we're meeting and we can do all those things, it's incredible that I can have that kind of training, engagement, experience. I can hop right in and move their mouse, right?
Yep.
But with those, every time we're opening up an access channel, right? This now becomes they're doing all of their personal things probably at home, as well as doing all of the remote things as well. So I'm speaking more to the remote workers that are out there to be aware of how much you are out there on the web between talking to your employer and sharing things that you may think are safe. You might think it's safe to email your employer, here's that credit card of so-and-so that we were talking to. No. You cannot send that via email, even through the secured networks, right? So it's just more of an awareness piece, too, of those people, because everyone's living in that world now.
Right. Well, I'll give a nod to our friends at Triterra. Triterra is a leading environmental consulting firm headquartered in Lansing, Michigan, with staff around the state to serve your brownfield development, environmental consulting, and natural resource management needs. Since 2008, Triterra has been successfully advising a wide range of organizations to implement solutions to complex environmental challenges. If you're a business, a developer, a property owner, a lending institution, an attorney, or a governmental entity looking for a solution and you want prompt and timely service, don't hesitate to contact my friends at Triterra. Led by CEO and visionary Don McNabb and leaders JP Buckingham and Dave Van Haren, and support by dozens of technical experts, you can't miss by calling Triterra at 517-702-0470 or visit them at triterra.us. So are there any hot topics kind of going on now? Any different legislation or new scams or new types of insurance? I mean, like cyber security, cyber insurance wasn't a thing 20 years ago. I mean, it's like anything like that that's kind of coming up.
I would say with the pandemic, we saw such an increase on things with the cybersecurity rolling out. So I would say what we went from was things like fraud or cybersecurity may not be an everyday conversation that I might have with just your average Joe that's calling me about a home quote, to pandemic hitting and every single person has to talk about it, right? It's sort of like I'd mentioned to you, those options and endorsements. That's where you find these things, right? So what I would say is anytime that you're looking for new or evolving things, you need to look at the options and the additional coverages. And once again, I keep using options and endorsements because that's the terminology you're going to hear. But think of that like the perks, right? Or the additions, if I had somebody, just to equate it back to medical, right? If I had somebody with asthma, I'm not going to go in with healthcare coverage, or if I have somebody with glasses, I'm not going to go into buying a healthcare plan that doesn't cover vision, right?
Right.
But we see people going online that don't realize that their package that they have, it's called the Gold Plus Plus. Well, I would think Gold Plus Plus would cover it. You have no idea what Gold Plus Plus means, right? So I would say the buzz thing that we're seeing is the packaging of everything is trying to get quicker and more commoditized. It is trying to get quicker and more transactional. And the reality is it's that deep breath of just stop for a second and let's think about what we were trying to do in the beginning. We were trying to protect the assets and things that we already own. If you have not had a conversation with someone, or if at any point during asking those questions there was an asset that you had that never came up, you are exposed. It's just a reality. So, there's constant legislation changes that have come out, right? And that's impacting, a lot of times just what all can be offered from a product basis. But the big change that we're seeing are these additions of new coverages. Some of the new ones that we've seen are like service line coverage. Now that we've got these cities that have been built, right, and you've got ones where you may have pipes that are running from the 50s or you may have ones from the 70s or 80s, the city may come in and rip up your yard and change water pipes from the street down to the house, and people don't realize that they own that piping from the house in as a responsibility, right? And so we've had tons of people where they may face a $5,000, $6,000, $10,000 charge for new pipes coming in from grass or from tree roots growing into it, and had no idea that they even were responsible for that. And guess what? Their homeowners doesn't cover it, right? The other part that we're seeing now is additional coverages for things like what makes your exoskeleton of your house move, right? The furnace, the water heater, anything that would need a tool to remove it from the house. They're adding on things like that called home systems. So the biggest thing is every single company is going to call this something different. And your job is going to be then, if you're the individual who's going out and shopping it. Anecdotally, you could ask even friends of yours that are in the industry, if they went out to a website and tried to do a quote themselves, how confident do they feel? And I can tell you, you're going to make errors. You may not just know the lingo of each company, right?
Right.
And so once again, that's where you see it being simplified down to gold plus, gold, premier, silver, bronze, whatever it might be. But the difference between bronze and silver might be towing, and you just don't know what you're getting just because you picked that package.
Right on. Okay. Fascinating. All right. Good stuff. And then on the business side, is there?
Yeah, the business side, once again, the biggest additions that we've seen are the cybersecurity, the data compromise, and you're going to run into how many people, does my local bakery, are they worried about credit cards that they're storing in a payroll system for companies that are reusing them, right? There's a lot of that local that I worry about do you have a larger enterprise that is required to meet these obligations from a safety and security standpoint, or did I store my credit card down at the local gym and I don't know if they have data compromise coverage, right? So I'm not going to go ask every company I'm dealing with, right? But you may see that they even offer, hey, here's our privacy policy or whatever it might be up front. We have those out on everybody's desk so that people can see them. But no one's reading an entirety of terms and agreements, right? And we're just checking boxes left and right. And that's scary from the sense of a lot of those won't even let you go into a legal case. You're just going to go into arbitration, right? And so that's something that's pre-set up by that company, designed to benefit them. So I'm more worried about the everyday person competing against the reality of the speed of the larger engines that are moving. Right. So that's where I just say, get somebody who's there. My kids are in these school areas, right? They're involved in these businesses. I care about the local government. I care about things happening. So when you have somebody who's an agent that actually does care about that impact and they care about their reputation in the community, that matters. And you and I both know that from going online to just selecting things, because we all hear the horror stories, right? But how many people change their actions off of hearing that? They hear about the time where somebody bought something that wasn't covered. The problem is a lot of times there's not recovery from that. Insurance is designed for that catastrophic. So when you make an error on the insurance, we're all hoping not to use it, right? And there's tons of people I have that go 20, 30 years without an auto accident. But then they have an auto accident. And now they're finding out that they haven't talked to somebody for 20 to 30 years and what's changed. And now they're facing $100,000, $500,000, $1 million loss, and they're paying back that settlement for the rest of their lives. There is no coming back from that, right? And just to plead it even more, the younger you are, the more exposure you have. Because if I have that happening, I have people all the time that are younger. I don't have, two nickels to rub together, so they're not concerned. Yeah, well, you have a future of income that can be taken away from you and can be garnished as part of some mistake you made rear-ending someone and they got out holding their neck. That could happen because you were distracted between exams. You know what I mean? Right. It's just, or mom and dad are on the title and now they're exposed. There's any litany of things that can happen that at least having someone there who's an agent who can say, hey, I got kids. I'm worried about this as well. Right. You've got people that are like-minded in your community that can watch out for you.
Well, is it odd that I am both relieved and scared to death at the same time?
No, I would call that the insurance industry, right? That's by definition, that's kind of what we run into.
Well, again, I bring you on as an expert in an industry that a lot of people, well, because you're an expert, we don't need to be. And, whether you use Kirk Byrens State Farm in Okemos, Michigan, or you use someone else, I think your thought leadership on the industry and
please use a human. Please, that's always been my plea has been use a human. And we have so many wonderful resources. I mean, we've as Lansing have, so many hubs here, right? Just support local, support local, find an agent, find a human, somebody that works with you and somebody that you can relate to. Because that will come through tenfold. Heaven forbid it's claim time. And I've had it before where I'm stopping out and, the little child's holding the teddy bear and we're trying to get him into a hotel room in the middle of the night due to a fire. That's not happening through a 1-800 number, So it's like I can tell any number of extreme stories. I just hope that so many people don't experience that, which is why I plead go to a person. Makes
a lot of sense. How can people get in touch with you if they want to hear more?
Yeah, so we're located right off of Grand River and Okemos Road, so you can stop into our office. You can give us a call at 517-349-3830, or you can visit my website at www.sfbyrens.com.
Fantastic. We've been talking to State Farm agent, Mr. Kirk Byrens. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom today. Always makes me anxious, but also confident that there are people out there like you that know what they're doing. So thanks for your leadership and joining me here today. I'd love to give a final shout out to all of my loyal sponsors: Wagoner Financial, Good Marketing, Triterra Environmental, Keller Williams Advantage and Team, the Michigan Rise, and the attorneys at Foster Swift, all fantastic people that are worth the call. And if you found the show as a one-off, I want to remind you to follow and subscribe to Michigan Reimagined on YouTube, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and pretty much anywhere you find your podcasts. This is Chris Buck signing off from Michigan Reimagined.